Next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about expectations. How do assistants manage, match, and exceed expectations when they don't know what they are? And on top of that, most assistants I know really do hold themselves to very high standards. So it's easy to wonder if you're meeting, let alone exceeding expectations. And I mean, I know I certainly have. So for me, expectations fall into two brackets. Are you understanding what is expected of you? That's the first one. Secondly, are you being told what is expected of you? And that's quite different. The first one is about you and your understanding of the role and the business. The second one is about your manager and how the two of you communicate. So we're going to look at expectations. And what I hope that you get out of this session is ultimately the elimination of those conversations where your boss says things to you like, oh, this piece of work isn't quite right, or handing the piece of paper back to the drawing board, or when you're thinking to yourself, do you know what, I'm sure this isn't what my job's supposed to be about. So let's start with how we can manage expectations. To manage expectations, you firstly have to know exactly what is expected of you. And the first step here is something that I talk about quite a bit, which is having a job description that covers all of the skills and all of the tasks that your boss requires of you to work effectively within your role. This, as I often say, is incredibly, incredibly rare. Job descriptions for assistants are sketchy at best, and often they have those dreaded phrases such as, and anything else that might need to be done, or ad hoc duties. This vague area is incredibly unhelpful, and it really should be taken out of our job descriptions. Now, if you have a detailed job description, this will really work in your favour because you will have the foundations of what to expect in your role, what is expected of you, and how to complete the tasks effectively. Once you have a greater understanding of your role, you can ask for clarity on the aspects you're not sure of. Don't assume that your understanding of a task or a skill is the same as your manager's. What I would say is take the initiative, ask your manager for more details, what the priorities are for you, what your objectives are, and what they consider success looks like within your role. Now, obviously this conversation is easier to have if you're new to the role. If you've been in the organisation a while and have established a routine with your manager, it can be slightly harder to bring up this topic, but I really do think it's worthwhile. My second point when it comes to managing expectations is knowing what your objectives are, what your executives' objectives are, and what your business's objectives are. Now, this is such an important area for assistants because, frankly, if you don't know what is driving your business forward, in turn, what is making your executive do what they do, and lastly, aligning your work with theirs, well, how do you know what you're doing every day? Where your tasks sit in relation to the business, and actually, if what you're doing makes any difference. Once you know all of these things, you'll be working in partnership with your executive, pushing this common objective forward, and you can manage the expectations of your colleagues, because let's face it, if they don't get the role, they don't have to. They just need to know what you do is focused on the objectives of the business and the objectives of your executive. And when they ask you to do things outside of those objectives, you can say no because they don't fit within the bracket of what you consider to be successful within your role and pushing your goals forward. I talk a lot to assistants about living and breathing their business's objectives and goals. It's really important for every aspect of the assistant role, and it's even more vital when it comes to managing expectations. When you understand where the business is going, you can get to grips with what is expected of you and what you can do to help the business be more successful. Okay, let's move on to part 2 of the session, matching expectations. Okay, what do I mean by matching expectations? Well, once you know what the expectations are, you need to continue to match them with your business, with your executive, and most importantly, with the expectations you have for yourself and for your career. So my first point is this. If you do not communicate well with your executive, how on earth do you have any idea of what is expected of you? And this comes down to what I was saying earlier. You need to be clearly told what is expected of you in a task or in general, and you need to understand what those expectations are. Now, I think it goes without saying that not all managers are good managers, and not all managers are good at communicating. Now, if you do have a manager that isn't very good at communicating what they want, then I really feel for you. I do, because it's really tough. And I think, again, this is worth saying, you're not going to change them. But what you can do is change your behaviour by really thinking about how best to make the communication flow, because you really need to. It's vital for your role. When it comes to working on your communication with your executive, I always say think about these following areas and adjust your style accordingly. So let's have a look at what they are. Firstly, how does your manager like to communicate? Is it by email, phone, WhatsApp, or good old-fashioned face-to-face meetings? How does your manager prefer to receive communications? Now, this could be a summary document, or perhaps they like to wait until you have your regular catch-ups. Do they like to collaborate with you on every single aspect of a task, or would they prefer just to see the end result? How often and what frequency should your communications be? How will you communicate any issues or barriers that you're facing? How will you deliver good news? And of course, how will you deliver bad news? Now, asking yourself these questions prior to any form of communication will ensure that you have thought through what you need to say and can give concise and effective messages. If you have a manager that doesn't communicate well, perhaps you can then ask more questions to get clarity on their expectations. A good manager really does need to set clear expectations, but it's also your job to ask questions and understand exactly what is expected of you. And remember that continual dialogue is important. As I've already said, to manage expectations, you must communicate regularly. Don't make the mistake that you and your manager are on the same page, because let's face it, it's hard enough being on the same page with your friends and family, let alone your work colleagues. So the only way you can ensure you understand what your boss wants from you is continuously communicate with them and have an open and honest dialogue. If you're worried you're not meeting expectations, you have to speak to your manager. Otherwise, there will be misunderstandings and assumptions on both sides. They will be assuming you have everything under control because you're not telling them about your struggles with expectations, or alternatively, they'll think you can't do the job, but the reality is that you're not exactly sure what the job is. And obviously within that, neither scenario is good. So continual dialogue provides the opportunity to gauge progress, make sure you're on the right track, and adjust your actions accordingly. If needed, you can ask for additional resources or change the deadlines. And obviously keeping your boss in the loop will ensure they're aware of your progress, whether it's good or bad. And during your communications, don't be afraid to ask for help. As an assistant, it's so easy for us to forget that our managers are actually also there to offer us guidance as much as they are every other member of staff. Just because we support them doesn't mean we can't ask their opinion on things or learn from their experiences. And a good manager will offer advice and guidance to their assistant because actually it's in their best interest that you exceed in your role. So let's have a look at an everyday scenario. Your manager has given you a series of tasks to work through, kind of normal day. So to meet their expectations, you will have to ask some specific questions, and the answers will give you the information you need to deliver what is expected of you. Make sure you ask them the following. What are the objectives of the project? Is it an ongoing project or task, or is there a deadline for success? If you do have a deadline, is it realistic? And what are you being judged on here? Now, don't let your manager get away with vague instructions. This is so important because actually it's a really easy thing to happen. You're there to support them, so they actually might spend less time explaining what they need from you than they would do with other colleagues, and I bet you see that a lot. Now, with longer term tasks such as diary or email management, do the same thing. Define exactly how they want you to manage their correspondence or calendar. And again, if you haven't had this conversation already, make sure that you have it soon. How else do you know if you're meeting their expectation on big tasks like this? If you've been working with your manager for a while, it's always worth having like a review meeting to suggest new ways of working and any best practice you've picked up from colleagues or previous roles, or actually any training sessions that you might have had. After the summit, you can arrange a meeting because you've picked up all of this new knowledge. Going forward with all of the tasks, do work in a way to ask what is expected of you by defining the specifics back to your manager. And you can do this either with a follow-up email or during the initial project conversation. Again, with longer term tasks, this approach works really well because you're ensuring you both have the same expectations. You can always follow up with any questions that will help you get back on track if you feel you're not meeting those expectations. And this is a really important point. Don't feel that asking questions signals that you can't do your job. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Asking your boss intelligent and thoughtful questions will show them that you care about your work and you're being diligent when it comes to the tasks that have been set for you. And this brings me to my next point. You really should evaluate your manager's expectations on a regular basis. Maintaining clear expectations is an ongoing process of constant retuning and clarifying. You have to make sure you're initially on the same page, but then you have to make sure you stay on the same page. In addition to your continual communications with your manager, you should be asking them questions. And as I said, this is a sign of diligence, not incompetence. If your boss notices that you're asking thoughtful questions, they will see you as being much more insightful and that you do truly care about your work. If you're confused about tasks, you should ask for further advice or explanation from your manager. If you don't, you're going to be left confused. You'll probably put the task off, which in the end will mean you don't achieve the deadline, and that's not going to look very good. As I said, don't be reticent about asking for more detail. Now, I think it's worth saying, don't constantly seek approval or get into the habit of immediately turning to your boss if there's any problems. It's kind of just going to annoy them and will probably lower your manager's expectations of you. Instead, in the time that you think is most appropriate, let them know if you're hitting any obstacles, what you're doing to overcome them, and any progress you've made. Adjust what is required of you depending then on the feedback of your manager. As I said, always make sure that you keep your manager in the loop. It can be really easy to get bogged down with your manager's tasks and responsibilities. So in catch-up meetings, you end up discussing their tasks and responsibilities more than you do your own. So during your catch-up meetings, just make sure that you have a couple of minutes just to feedback on any progress on any particular projects that you're working on. For me, I think it's always worth having that document that details where you are with the tasks that you're working on, so you can just rattle off any points of pain or any progress that you've made. The better your relationship with your manager, the much easier it is to manage expectations, and actually the much easier it is to communicate with them. Some parts of managing expectations is pushing back, particularly when the expectations are too high. So having a good relationship with your manager comes into its own at this point. It can be hard to speak up when expectations of you are unrealistic, but it is easier to talk about your concerns when your boss knows that you care about the work and that they also care about you. It is easy to feel pressured into completing every single task that is asked of you, staying late into the night or getting up at the crack of dawn to get into the office to get everything finished. Now, it is really noble to have such a strong work ethic, but this approach can quickly get out of control and it can really affect your well-being. We sometimes forget that we can say no to certain tasks and responsibilities, especially as we are there to support extremely busy and important executives. If you do have concerns that you won't be able to meet deadlines, then plan an alternative approach and discuss that with your manager. Don't bury your head in the sand and just hope that you're going to get through everything. Also, think about the best time to raise those concerns. And as I said, having an awareness of their mood, getting to know them, and getting to know what their day looks like is going to help you pick the best point in the day to discuss any issues that you might have. It's never ever easy saying no straight out. So then you can also deflect and suggest alternatives. So for example, the expectation is that you get this piece of work done, but you can't because you can't stay late into the night. Then suggest that you come in early, or suggest that you log on at home once you've finished dealing with the things that you have in your personal life. It's worth remembering that unless you have an absolute asshole for a manager, your executive will never intend to set unrealistic expectations. But it does happen, particularly if they have pressing deadlines or other priorities. Also, a lot of managers, and I've had experience of this, they don't understand actually how long tasks take to complete. In fact, a lot of managers don't really know how long it takes you to do anything because you just make it happen. Educate your boss so that they understand how long tasks take. When asked to complete something quickly, actually say how long this is going to take and what that's then going to jeopardize in terms of your other tasks. I think your boss actually will be quite impressed that you're thinking about the priorities and objectives for yourself as well as for the business. It's your job to communicate your ability to do the work and to educate people about your role. Now, I know that's incredibly painstaking, but that is your responsibility. Okay, so now that we've looked at how you manage and match expectations, let's finish by looking at how you can exceed expectations. When it comes to adding value as an assistant, I always come back to the same piece of advice, and that is be proactive. Proactivity will always be a central skill for assistants. And again, it's really important when you want to exceed expectations. You need to be on top of everything that you do so that your manager doesn't have to worry about managing you. And a good way of appearing proactive is keeping a record on the status of each task that your manager has given you. If you're able to reel off updates super quickly, you're going to look like you have got everything in control. Also, be proactive with the basics. If something is broken, go and fix it, and try to keep everything ticking over nicely so that your manager doesn't have to be concerned with the usual office issues. There are a number of ways you can be proactive throughout your working day, and here's some suggestions. Keep your boss up to date on what they need to know. Seek your manager's support when you want to make key decisions. Remove anything that may cause your manager concern or unnecessary stress. Identify and implement any improvements that will make your manager's day easier. And one little tip that I always used to do, that always used to get good feedback on, was at the end of every working day, I just used to put my head through my manager's office door and just say, I'm heading off. Is there anything else that you want me to do before I go? Now, this just made my manager feel like, despite the fact I was heading home, I was still thinking about them and making sure that they were okay. And if there was anything, they delegated it to me, and I could either then deal with it when I got home, or if I had something else on, then as soon as I came in the next morning, I could make sure that it was done. So do be self-motivated and do go the extra mile when you can. It really does help your manager feel like you're exceeding their expectations. And my final piece of advice about exceeding expectations is this, and it's a really practical one. Have some contingency time. Having a contingency plan in place can be difficult, I know, because of all of the amount of work that you've got to get through. But but just try to get a little bit of contingency time in place every day so that you can manage any urgent requests that might come in from your executive. Now, I know, as I said, of course, when you're ploughing through your tasks, it isn't particularly positive to assume that something will go wrong or you're going to encounter any problems. But honestly, it is so worthwhile preparing in advance any last minute requests that your boss is going to want. If you can just stop what you're doing, get those done, because you've got that contingency time, then you can go back to what you were doing. You are going to massively exceed expectations. As I said, as you guys all know, being an EA, any day can be completely unpredictable. But if you can just give yourself a little bit of time, as I said, that is going to really help you exceed expectations when you can just get things done.